Unity has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love and a sense of community.
In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, may the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon you. Welcome to this Press Point, and today we are looking at the European Union and the issues between the vote to remain campaign and the vote to leave campaign, and you can coin it as a show on the issues of Europe or Brexit. So we're joined in the studio, very, very lucky, very blessed to be joined in the studio by Jean Lambert, MEP. Jean Lambert, MEP, is the London regional candidate or the MEP representative in the European Parliament, and is also a member of the Green Party and a long-standing, long-serving member of the European Parliament for London as well. Thank you very much, Jean, for joining us in the studio.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope.
Yes, it will be an engaged show because it's a very topical issue, because today is Sunday, the election, the referendum is on Thursday, and Farouk, you've got a lot of topics online, but also you're handling our social media, so very good to have.
Indeed. To leave or not to leave, that's the question. Let's see how the vote goes on next Thursday, 23rd of June. We are talking about the European Union. Should Britain remain in or should leave? Of course, this is a supranational, it's a hybrid system of supranational and intergovernmental decision-making in the European Union, should Britain now decide to take its own way. 500 million plus population in EU, plus 4.3 million plus square kilometres of area is covered. 28 member states. There's a lot on stake. So please do share with us your views. Send us your emails to presspoint@mt.tv. You can send us your tweets using the hashtag PressPointMTA. You share with us and we'll share with the MTA's worldwide audience on this very forum through Presspoint. Jonathan.
And Farouk, let's start with the VT, an intro VT, giving an idea of the issues and the topics within the referendum debate. Let's go to that now.
Should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? The British public will be deciding the outcome of this on Thursday the 23rd of June. The European Union, or EU, is a political and economic partnership between 28 countries in Europe, basically a single market, so trade, goods and people can move around as if it is one country. 19 out of the 28 member states use the euro as their currency, and there is one overruling parliament, which now sets some rules and laws for all member states. However, immigration and employment issues have led to fears over the UK's EU membership, with many calling for tighter border controls and less accountability to EU laws that are made in Brussels rather than in London. David Cameron, Prime Minister of the UK, promised an EU referendum in the 2015 elections. Since a referendum is a yes or no question, there are pros and cons in regards to this issue. Firstly, the government is in favour of remaining in the EU. They argue that Britain is safer and stronger within the Union, but recognises that there are issues which need to be negotiated for Britain to stay, i.e. stricter immigration and welfare control, and more control over domestic laws and politics. Supporters of the EU argued that free movement fuels economic growth, and that leaving the EU could damage the status of Britain, as well as wanting to keep the security of being part of a 28-nation club. Britain's closest neighbours, France, have already said there would be consequences if the UK leaves. The majority of MPs and most big businesses are in favour of staying, citing the importance of these trade, security and political factors. In short, they wish to reform the issues within the Union rather than leaving and having no influence in the future. On the other side of the debate, the Vote Leave camp is making a strong case for parting way with what they say is an undemocratic and failed system that is wasting away millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. Key figures such as UKIP leader Nigel Farage and ex-Mayor of London Boris Johnson are urging the public to bring British sovereignty back from Brussels and are dismissing claims that we need to be part of the EU to still have influence on the world stage. So is Britain being the difficult child of the European family, causing tantrums just to have things their own way? Or has the constantly expanding bureaucracy of the EU really become unbearable for a nation that thinks it will be better off on its own? Either way, the public will decide next Thursday.
So this was the summary of the issues and the topics surrounding the debate. We should also mention, of course, that we have Julie Ward, MEP, with us as well by phone. We'll come to Julie later on. So starting off with some of the issues around the debate, Farouk, what's been in the news?
Well, news are filled with these stories these days, actually, so I've picked a couple of stories to start things off with. The first one is on BBC, says IMF says EU exit largest near-term risk to British economy. It's talking in terms of numbers, saying a UK exit from the European Union could mean the UK misses out on up to 5.6% of GDP growth by 2019. So IMF is predicting otherwise, that Britain is on course of progress of 5.9%, which is pretty good percentage per year. At the same time, as what we heard on the VT, that the French authorities also are feeling that Britain should not leave the European Union. That's the message by the finance minister from France, who says Brexit would make Britain like Guernsey, he says. He says leaving the European Union would make the UK as significant, or insignificant he must say, as Guernsey, France's economy minister has said. Emmanuel Macron told Le Monde newspaper that Britain would become a little country on the world scale that would isolate itself at Europe's borders. And lastly, looking at all interesting polls today. We've got four different polls of some sort of reputation. The first one is Opinion. We know it is from The Observer. That is showing 44% each, even Stevens for both Leave and Remain today. Similarly, Survation is putting Remain ahead at 45% versus 42%. That is Daily Mail reporting that. Then we have YouGov, which we understand is from Good Morning Britain. That's putting Leave ahead at 43% and 42%. And at the end, the BMG, which is, I think, Herald's opinion poll, which is putting Remain ahead by 3% at 46%. So in other words, this Brexit hangs in the balance at the moment. It's very hard to predict, and probably Jean will discuss about that more in detail as to where we stand today. Jean.
Yes. So Jean, just Farouk's told us it's a very closely run referendum. It is Sunday and the vote is on Thursday. There's many different issues which are engaged. But could you give us a bit of an overview about what exactly we're voting for? What is the purpose of the vote? When people go to the ballot boxes on Thursday, what is the big question which voters need to decide?
Well, the question they're going to be asked, as we were hearing, is about whether to remain or to leave the European Union. And I think what we've been hearing from the doorsteps in this is that people think it's about a range of things. But that's fundamentally what it is. What is our future relationship with the European Union and, by extension, with many other countries in the world? So it is not a referendum about halting immigration. That may be one of the issues that people are bearing in mind, but we know that we've been hearing some people will say, oh, well, in that referendum on immigration. It's not. It's about our relationship with the European Union. So it's about, from my perspective, and I'm very strongly in favour of remaining, whether we want to walk away from a relationship which I believe is working for us. It could work better, but which gives us a seat at the table for discussions and decisions about huge major issues, about climate change. I'm a Green, that matters to me, should matter to everybody in the world, but about climate change, about international security in terms of the information that we share and how we tackle a number of the threats posing, that are in front of us at the moment, and of course about economics, jobs and economics. So it's all of those things, and that's, you know, that's the decision. It's a huge decision, and you know, I think the key thing is for people who are going to vote, this is a major decision. This is not the time to show that you're annoyed with the government or annoyed with your neighbour or whatever. This is a really important decision we're making.
We hear these terms like EU, European Parliament, European Commission, Eurozone. They're very confusing terms for me personally. For in a layman's language, what would you say? What do they mean in very plain English?
Well, I'm not surprised people are confused. I mean, it's, you know, I think it feels to me that this referendum is a bit like, you know, cramming for an exam where you never went to any of the classes for a lot of people, and you're really trying to catch up with what it's about. The European Union brings together now 28 countries. Yeah. It has its origins in the 1950s after the two horrendous world wars that we saw on the continent of Europe. And what it was designed to do at the very beginning was to bring together, in particular, France, Germany, but other countries that wanted to join at that point, to try and make it impossible for there ever to be a war like that again on the continent of Europe, let alone globally. And therefore to try and have countries trading together, working together economically, politically as well, that's always been there from the very beginning, to try and ensure that there would be peace. So it has, I think, you know, really deep and important roots. The way that it works these days, and it's been changing over time, it started off being 6 countries that agreed amongst themselves, just their governments, you know, and then moving to having a parliament that was, you know, people turned up from national parliaments to sit and discuss things. Now we're at a stage where it's developed and a lot more countries have joined. So we have 28 countries that together make a lot of the decisions. The council that people were here talked about brings together representatives of those 28 governments. The democratic oversight and part of the decision making these days as well comes from the directly elected parliament that I'm in, and we are elected. One of the things I'm hearing a lot in this referendum is people who still think that somehow
not elected.
Some of the people who think that members of Parliament are appointed still, and you think, no, we've been electing them since 1979. We really should have caught up with that. And then there's the what people like to describe as, you know, these unelected bureaucrats who force everything on us, etc. This is the Commission, and this is a body of, it's now 28 people. Each national government appoints one person to this body, which is, it's an odd mix. It's civil service plus, because yes, it's political.
But any government will have civil servants anyway.
Any government will have civil servants anyway. Those civil servants are not not elected. You know, they are appointed, and you could appoint them in a more democratic way if parliaments wanted to, but they're usually happy to leave it to government. So at the moment, it's our Prime Minister who appoints our representative. That's currently Lord Hill, who has the brief for working on financial regulation. I'm not sure why the British government would want their commissioner to work on finance, but anyway. So that's what he does. And so each of these commissioners has a particular sort of sphere of influence that they work on, that yes, they're the ones who put legislation on the table, but they're not the people who decide on the legislation. Okay. You know, that's the government working with the European Parliament that makes that decision. And then it goes to the national parliaments, who then, most of it, they will enact and fill in the details according to their own their own country.
Okay. And so there are many different issues to look at within the debate. But if we just start from your perspective, because you've told us you're in favour of Remain, and could you just give us a summary of why you believe Britain should stay within the European Union?
I think Britain should stay within the European Union because I believe that we are stronger when we share some of our decision making with our neighbours, that when we share that decision making on issues of international importance, whether that's the international economy, control of big business and finance, whether it's about the rights at work that we have so that we compete fairly and not on the lowest possible standards, when we cooperate on cross-border issues such as the environment and climate change and on our international security and indeed international development. That when we work together, I think that gives us a strength, that we learn from each other, that we move forward mostly, sometimes backwards, but that it is this collaboration, this cooperation. And I think that is extremely important in today's world, which is so interconnected, that it's very, very difficult to say really where one country's decision-making rights end and another country's start on so many of these issues. And so that when people talk about sovereignty and being able to make our decisions for our country, I think that's not really looking at a lot of those wider issues where actually to decide jointly can be so much stronger and so much more important.
Mm-hmm. So you have it's really the interrelationship of nations which you focus on there. So from the news, what are some of the issues that are coming forward to the forefront of the debate?
Jonathan, before I move on, I think probably something you just mentioned a couple of seconds ago. This is a message from Nasir Ahmed on our Twitter account, says, Islam teaches us the unity, Brexit will be a division. My opinion for UK referendum is Remain. Okay, let's look at one of the interesting statistics that we've got here. Talking about the Green Party, let's talk about other parties too. You would not be surprised to hear that the government is split in the middle when it comes to what to do, Remain or Leave. Conservative Party has 172 members who have declared to be taking a stance in favour of Remain and 132 for Leave. I think it's about 56% Conservative people who have Conservative members of Parliament who have declared to be taking part in this on this vote. Labour Party is less confused apparently when it comes to this. 228 people have declared, of them 218 people have said they would go for Remain. So clearly it's about 95+% in Labour Party have declared. Other parties like SNP or Liberal Democrats, they have very clear stance on this, 54 and 8 people respectively. And one more interesting thing before we move further on, we can't of course forget the job of the media these days, of course, especially the print media, as we've been discussing before the show. This is a study, an academic study carried out by Loughborough University, and they have looked at which were those newspapers that have published stories about Leave and Remain. Both are divided in 5 and 5. 5 big newspapers are in favour of Remain and 5 in favour of Leave. But that's not where the story ends. The truth is that when we look at a number of articles, now let me just quickly go through what they are. Of course, if you look at these newspapers, it could be put into 3 different groups. One group is in fact the quality newspapers like Guardian, Telegraph, Financial Times. One group is mid-tier or mid-market, they call it. And third group is popular group, if you like. So looking at the Leave side of the campaign, that's got more of popular newspapers. And of course, one of them we could call mid-tier or mid-market, Daily Express. Whereas Telegraph is one of the high-level ones which has gone for Leave. Whereas when it comes to the Remain side of the campaign, Financial Times, Guardian and the Times are in favour. And there's a couple more, like Daily Mirror, you could call it to be one of the popular ones which is in favour. The story is that 60% of the articles, they've looked at all the history of the articles in the last 1 month and they collated all the information. 60% of the articles are in favour of Leave, 40% being in favour of Remain. But further aspect is, of course, as you would also know, these popular newspapers are more widely circulated. So that's even more important statistics, that what about the number of people who receive the message? And that goes in 80-20 in favour of Leave. So perhaps
from the larger
populist, yes.
Which papers are we talking about?
We're talking about Daily Mail, The Sun, Daily Express, Daily Telegraph, and the Daily Star. The other newspapers. And the FT, Financial Times, of course. So economics, clearly what it means is, what it's sort of a message coming, the hidden message is that when it comes to economics, people do believe that UK could suffer. Apparently, I don't know, I can sort of, looking just at the newspapers, one just feels that there could be another message within that which we need to see.
Yes. Okay. So this is what the papers think. So let's have a look at what the public think. So we've got a video of the people on the street. So let's go and have a listen to them now.
Okay, so I want to stay in the EU, and I think the reason I want to stay in is because it's been very beneficial for us. I can remember the country in the late 60s and early 70s when we were the poor man of Europe and the place was an absolute disaster. I think it's been hugely beneficial for us. I think one of the reasons that the country's recovered so strongly recently is because we've had the benefit of migrant labour from Europe to come in and work here. That's all been very, very positive. I think we have a huge amount of investment in this country because companies from America, China, Japan, India all want to be based in the UK so that they can trade with Europe. And I think if we leave, they will stop investing in the country. And we also have a serious problem that if we leave, Scotland may very well leave the Union, and then the country will be isolated.
I want to leave Europe. It's a waste of money. I don't even know who the president of the European Union is. I think England can cope. I don't know why they do like scare tactics, saying, "Oh, we'll lose this. It costs. The economy will go bust." But England's coped with economic crisis in England before 2008. We can cope again. I think it's just a waste of money. I don't think they benefit us. I've spoken to a few people that were out last weekend in Kingston, and they're saying Europe needs us, and said, yeah, they do need us, we don't need them at the end of the day. It's just a waste of money.
I'm at the moment still a bit undecided and vacillating. I feel that the information we have, I'm trying to cut through to sort of more kind of hard facts. The speculation, particularly with the Remain campaign, is erring terribly on the pessimistic side, I feel, because they've got their argument to say, and it's the things we've got. Osborne is recently talking about tax increases. Cameron was then saying about this oomph as if it's some like incentive to stay. The Leave campaign has focused terribly heavily on this figure of 350 million a week that goes out to the EU in terms of health. Now that, as everyone keeps saying, isn't actually factually correct in the sense of if you actually cut through to what it is, it's a figure that's being used, but when you break it down, it's not quite like that. And there's obviously elements of it which have to be applicable to what we would have to do anyway.
Definitely in. I'm a European, and I always believe that the EU saved a lot of wars in the last 70 years, and that's the main reason why I'm in. But also economically, it's been good for the UK economy. And I don't care what the outers say, that there's no argument that convinced me that we'd be better off than in.
So, 3 different views, one strongly in favour, one strongly against, and one, he said he was vacillating in the middle, in between. So let's use them and those public perspectives to help us to go into some of the issues then, Farouk. So in terms of, there's numerous different points we can start on, but I think the economy is a big issue, isn't it? And that is, well, how will the economy do? Will it be better or will it be worse? And the latter gentleman mentioned the figure of 350,000. So if we can have a look at that and
350 million, actually.
Sorry, yeah, 350 million. 350,000 would be different. That might be the salary of an executive in the city. But yeah, so this is having a look at the Leave campaign, then, and also the Remain campaign. They're focused on figures and they've got the statistics and the infographics. And one of the quotes from the Leave campaign is, "We will be able to save 350 million a week. We can spend our money on our priorities like the NHS, schools and housing." Jean, what do you think about that?
Well, the 350 million figure, I mean, has been taken apart by the Office of National Statistics and various other bodies. And that may be, if you like, the bill that's on the paper, but it's not what's paid, because we have a system, a rebate that was negotiated for various reasons in the past by Mrs. Thatcher, the famous handbag. So in fact, it's less than that we actually hand over. We also get some of that back because the European Union is also something of a bit of a solidarity mechanism as well, that it's not just about you put your money in, they count it and give it back to you. It's also about how it's used across the European Union. So we get quite a lot back, for example, in subsidy for our farmers and the Common Agricultural Policy. We get quite a lot back for areas that really are still economically in difficulties, Cornwall, for example, and Wales in particular. Even London, parts of London in the past have had EU funding. It's part of what built Tottenham Hale railway station. Right. So, we get some of that back. We get more of it back because we're very, very good at actually applying for project money, for example, for research. So we lead quite an important sort of research program into dementia. So there are these sort of things, plus smaller programs which don't normally show up in the figures, but which will deal on cross-border projects, for example, to help combat domestic violence or things like this. Yeah. So it's not 350 million a day. And of course, the second part of that is, okay, we may not get back all the money that we hand in, but do I actually believe that it would be spent on the NHS and other things? Well, personally, for me, that's a bit of a leap too far to believe that some of these people that are into austerity politics actually really want to spend more on our public services. Yeah. I mean, but that's more of a political point.
But they would ask a question. They would say, the other side of the argument, the Leave campaigners, that we have a separate currency. We don't go with euro. Separately, we also, at the same time, we also have a the borders are controlled. So most of it is already there. I mean, Britain is a separate entity in its own right. What else is left in EU anyway?
Well, it's true that certainly we're not part of what's called the Schengen area, which is the borderless area that we and Ireland and 1 or 2 other countries are not part of it. It's also true that we're not part of the euro. But nevertheless, we are part of the regulation, the financial regulation. And if we want to carry on working, if the City of London wants to carry on working within the European Union, there are certain rules that it has to abide by. So we're part of the regulatory system on finance. We're part of the regulatory system on the environment. So a lot of the things that affect our air quality, our water quality, the energy efficiency standards of new build homes or whatever, that's part of the European Union as well. We're also part of it increasingly on issues around justice. I mean, the UK has, again, a point there where it can opt in or not, depending as to whether it likes what's on the table. Some of it we will opt into, like the European arrest warrant, which means that people can be picked up and brought back to the UK much more easily from elsewhere within the European Union than they could do in the past. So there are still, and vice versa, absolutely vice versa. And that also applies as well to the extradition of our own nationals, which isn't the case in a lot of the other extradition agreements that we have. So, we're bound in an awful lot of ways. And so when people talk about coming out as if we're already sort of halfway out the door, it's not that easy. Okay. There's a lot that binds us.
Yeah. Well, let's. So as I mentioned earlier, we have Julie Ward, who was going to join us in the studio, but then she had to join by phone. And let's try and give her a call, and let's see if we can get through to Julie Ward. So yeah, we've just heard that she's not available actually, and I think the reason that she mentioned is that unfortunately, I think we'll cover this shortly, Farouk, is the tragic murder of Jo Cox, MP, and I believe that there's a vigil today for Jo Cox, and that she's travelling to that. So going back to this economy point then, on the other hand, and this is a point that David Cameron's made in a lot of the debates, and I think he's come back to this, and if you could help us to understand it, he said that 9 out of 10 economic experts predict economic damage if we leave. So a lot of the viewers at home will be thinking, well, why are the experts, 90% of them, worrying the IMF, Mr. Carney from the Central Bank, Bank of England, why are they warning about economic damage if we leave? What are the risks there?
There are risks in a number of areas. I mean, you would expect that if it's a vote to leave, that the international markets will get very nervous about that. They like stability. So, and we've already seen money leaving the country with people just waiting to see what the outcome is. So I think that, however hard or soft the landing, we're certainly going to have an immediate response in that respect. There's also a question about what then follows. And again, more and more uncertainty about what follows. What sort of trade deal will we have with the European Union? We're hearing some very mixed messages on that. Some who believe that we can almost carry on as we are, which I think is highly unlikely, certainly from what I'm hearing from colleagues at the European Parliament. So then, okay, so what's the trading regime? And if you don't know what the trading regime is, where are you going to invest? If you were holding off your investment in the UK to see what the outcome was, well, if the UK is walking away from the European Union, we're no longer a bridge into the European Union for your investment. So we heard this from Rolls-Royce. We've heard this from a lot of the finance companies saying, well, if you're not going to be in there, okay, we'll make another choice. We'll go somewhere else where, where we can get into this market of 440 million people. If the UK are out of it. So there's all of that. There's a whole set of questions as well about what contract law is going to apply. So you've got a whole set of questions. What's the trading regime? What are the trading tariffs? What's the contract law? Are you really going to invest in the UK when we're coming out of the European Union? So a whole set of instabilities there. And I think that will have big implications for future investment. It will also have implications for employers who will be thinking, do they take on new employees? Do they not? They want to see sort of how things are going to pan out before they actually even start, taking more people on. So I think it's highly likely that we are actually going to be in for an extremely bumpy ride. And you have to put that together, in my view, with the fact as well that we're still looking at further cuts here, further austerity measures to actually try and fill the budget hole that the Chancellor has already identified. So we've got that increased instability on top of the budget hole that the Chancellor has already identified. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. I'm not a great fan of the Chancellor. Different politics, but yes. My colleague Molly Scott-Cato, is an MEP for Greens for the South West, who is an economist, a professor of economics, says that it is very, very rare that you get this number of economists together lining up to give you the same outcome. Mm-hmm. Very rare indeed, and therefore you should pay attention.
Well, looking at it from the position of jobs and wages as well, the figures quoted by the Remain campaign are that over 3 million UK jobs are linked to trade with the EU, 1 in every 10 jobs in this country. And they also say that being in the UK will create 790,000 more jobs by 2030. What is it that, and then they also cite the figure, the Trade Union Congress, that says the average wage would fall by £38 a week if we left Europe. But focusing on the positive for a moment, because a lot of people have criticised Cameron and the Remain campaign and Labour and all the parties for having a pessimistic view. Looking at it positively, why is it that the EU benefits the UK financially in terms of jobs and trade and wages? How do people in the UK and their homes benefit from being part of Europe?
Well, there are a variety of ways. One of them, of course, is the fact that there are companies that site here to sell on into the rest of the European Union. And they quite like the regulatory regime that they have. They feel that they can do business here, and therefore they will sell in. So some of the jobs are very much connected to us being this bridge into the European Union. Some of the others will also be because we have a pool of labour here that that you can draw on. A lot of people are very attracted to coming to work in the UK. We see this from the European Union, that people come partly because of the language. English is an international language, so come and work somewhere where you can actually improve your English if you want to improve your skills. So it's relatively easy to recruit here compared to some other European Union countries. And I mean, some might argue that we could do more about job quality, and I'm with the TUC on that. But nevertheless, you know, there's that. You can find work here. We have a demand for workers at all skill levels. You know, whether that's Danish guy I was speaking to today who works in finance in the city and who thinks we should leave, you know, to people who are working in the care sector. Very, very necessary jobs. So it's those sort of things. And also part of the pricing, of course, links to common agricultural policy, that, you know, which means that we're not paying tariff on food imports. So there are those sorts of things, you know, even down to trying to make your appliances more energy efficient so they use less energy and cost you less. Is, you know, I mean, we heard a lot about kettles and toasters in this campaign, but that's really what it's about. It's about energy efficiency, so fewer climate emissions, lower costs.
But it's because, because they're telling us, rather than us really sort of taking the stand, it's the European Union that's keeping us being more green, apparently. That's what we're saying, are we?
Well, I think the European Union does. I mean, the British, by and large, have been quite happy to support those sort of policies as well. Okay. So we've been important in actually helping to make the European Union more green. Yes. As well. So this is also, I think, part of the discussion that we've not had a lot in this campaign is about what the UK actually brings to the European Union as well. I mean, I think one of the other things that we've really brought has been a much better understanding about equality and diversity.
Jean, you mentioned about the exports from the UK. Just wondering, of course, what's your stand on this? What do you think? We have about 5% of UK businesses that export to the EU and 95% don't. But 100% red tape is because of EU. Do you not see that to be a problem? Did you see the argument on the other side?
Well, I think it's partly a question about what you define as red tape. Okay. And I think, you know, that if you're looking at health and safety standards, regulatory standards on energy efficiency, on not having lead paint in your kids' toys, this sort of thing, I think that sort of regulation is very positive regulation. I think also that if you look at sort of the OECD you know, sort of view, that the UK, out of the countries that the OECD covers, the UK is sort of in the bottom 2 or 3 for regulatory difficulty. So, you know, people who think we're difficult maybe should try working in another country and doing a comparison. And of course, there's also as well with some of the issues around regulation is that some of the time it isn't actually the European Union that does the, you know, every sort of last nut and bolt on it, as it were. That if it's a directive, the European Union sets the standards, and by and large it's the national parliament, the national government, that will actually fill in how this should happen in the UK. Right. So this is something, you know, that certainly the previous government, you'd have heard Vince Cable and others talking about gold plating, that the UK adds its own regulation as well, and then of course anything the UK adds, the EU gets the blame for it because people don't like regulation. So, you know, there was this move here also to look at, well, how much additional sort of regulation is the UK adding? Yes. And presumably the government is still going on with that.
So that's the economic argument we looked at. We looked at the green argument. What are some of the other issues online that you're finding people are raising, and those articles you mentioned?
Thank you. That strengthens your viewpoint, Jean. The example I've got here is the news from Independent. EU referendum leaving Europe could slash billions from NHS budget, Heidi Alexander has warned, who is the shadow health secretary, I think she is. Yes. And of course also mentions that as set out by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which suggests that the economic impact of leaving the EU could lead to the Department of Health to slashing billions from its spending. So clearly that is also something to consider. Perhaps talking about a bit of science and technology side of things, the research, which I think is very close to people's heart. This is a picture of one of the leading scientists world over, a face well recognized, Stephen Hawking. He has said very clearly that gone are the days when we could stand on our own against the world, on our own against the world. He said on the television breakfast show, we need to be part of a larger group of nations, both for our security and our trade. The possibility of leaving the EU has already led to a sharp fall in the pound because the markets judge that it will damage our economy. And before we move on further, I think another sort of area of it's maybe worth a couple of seconds to spend time on, and maybe a bit more than that, to be honest. We lost Jo Cox, the MP, in Betley and Spen, West Yorkshire, and she was, very importantly, mother of two very young children. Looking at her Twitter account after she's passed away, very sad reading. When I looked at her tweet she pinned, and that tweet says that immigration is a legitimate concern, but it's not a good reason to leave the EU. So that's the last message that she left behind on her Twitter account.
Well, this is perhaps the two main topics that within the debate in many ways, which is the economy and immigration, and I think this is played out a lot in the debates, particularly the David Cameron and the Nigel Farage debate that happened on ITV, or not a debate, but it was questions and answers. So let's turn to that next and look at immigration. In terms of the issues around immigration, well, perhaps before we do, maybe it'd be useful. You gave us an understanding earlier about the EU. Could you give us a summary on how does immigration work in relation to the EU?
Okay, well, the way in which immigration works in relation to the European Union is that it's a reciprocal arrangement, unlike other immigration policy. So that within the European Union, I, for example, I choose to go and look for work in Italy, I can do that. An Italian can go and look for work in Poland, a Pole can come and look for work here. So, and if you do that, the basis of what you're doing is that when you're there in that country, particularly if you're working, you're treated on the same basis as a national of that country. So therefore, your social security entitlements are the same as a national of that country. If you want to need to qualify for housing benefit or whatever, it's the same rules as a national of that country. And the same if you're a student looking to study elsewhere. And we've got at the moment, I think, something like 10,000 students from the UK who are studying elsewhere in the European Union. In some places that means they'll be paying no tuition fees because students in that country don't pay tuition fees. If they want to come and study in the UK, well, unless they've got very rich parents, they live with a debt. So, that's the basis of it. So it's unlike, as I say, sort of migration coming from States, Canada, Australia, whatever. This is reciprocal. So we have those rights within the European Union.
So let's say Spain is a very popular country for Brits. Expats like to go to Spain. How would British expats be affected by pulling out of the EU?
I think the absolutely truthful answer at this point is that nobody quite knows. I think the likelihood is that those that have long-term residence rights, so therefore have been there longer than 5 years, have a formal sort of right to stay, will probably be able to stay on and be covered. I would also hope that we would honour the agreements that we have about recognition of people's accumulated pension rights or whatever for EU nationals that have worked here.
Let me clarify as well, Jean, sorry to jump in. What about people that haven't yet moved but would like to go to Spain, for example, or someone that wants to study medicine but hasn't got in the UK but would like to study in Prague is another example?
I think that is one of the big areas that really lacks clarity at the moment about quite what the impact of voting to come out would be and how fast that would take effect. That according to the treaty that governs the European Union, there's the becoming more famous Article 50 of it, which is that once the government serves notice that it wishes to leave, then there's an initial 2 years of negotiation which can be extended if all parties, all the other countries agree. So you're looking at the best part of 2 years. And I think that from certainly what I've been hearing from a lot of people who are talking to me from, EU nationals living in London, people I know from the UK living elsewhere, this is something they want clarified as fast as possible because some of them are really, really worried. I know people who are living in Belgium at the moment who are looking at what do I need to do in order to get Belgian citizenship? People living here from the other EU countries saying, what do I do to get British citizenship? Particularly if they're married to somebody.
And have children here,
and you have children here. You can be in this amazing situation where I don't know, as a father, your wife and your children are British citizens, you're not. What does this mean for you? And we know as well that this government has not been particularly sympathetic to family reunion for people coming from third countries. And if you look at, the financial threshold you have to pass in order to be able to deem, 18,000 or so to be deemed to support, your partner, plus it's a supplement for children, isn't it? That if you start saying, well, we're going to treat people on the same basis as people from third countries, it's no wonder people are worried about this. So this is...
So in reality, there's a risk that for those EU couples, that they could be in a similar position to couples from Philippines or from India. Let's say a British gentleman marries an Indian woman, she's here in the UK without rights. How does she remain? She goes to the tribunal, she fights a case. How does an EU couple stay? Well, she relies on EU residency, which the Indian spouse wouldn't. What happens to the Spanish, the Polish, the other EU members, citizens, when they lose those rights within the UK? So these are issues to be thought about.
They are very, very big issues, and this is part of, what direction of negotiation would we want afterwards? Would it be trying to keep ourselves closely linked to the European Union and going for this so-called Norway option where you pay but don't have a say? Or, are we really going to be striking out by ourselves? And if we are, then the implications, I think, as we were saying, for EU nationals who want to work here or who maybe haven't been here very long, really needs sorting very, very fast, because this is a horrible situation for people to be in.
What do you think, for example, let's say, if Britain decides to leave, of course we know that there's no way back apparently, out is out, in is in, as German Finance Minister said about Britain on this issue. What happens to EU then? Do you think EU would again, other countries will slowly try to go and becomes disintegration altogether in EU? What's the future looking like at the moment for other countries then?
I think that's certainly a concern, that if the UK comes out, this sets a fault line going, which other countries would certainly have an effect. I mean, we were talking about the effect on the UK economy. There's an effect on the EU economy if we come out. The euro is already not the world's most stable currency at this point. So people who care about Greece should be voting for us to remain, because if things go even worse there, then Greece is going to be in an even worse situation.
But that's also another argument from the other side. They would say simply that we have been bailing out euro effectively, and again, going forward, when countries like Albania or Macedonia or Montenegro or even Turkey, to say, although it seems like scaremongering than anything else, if that happens, then clearly it becomes even worse for Britain, because you're trying to bail out a currency which already is tiring, and then more nations trying to get the same piece of cake.
But that's one of the things that David Cameron's negotiation has set out, that we are not in the euro, we are not joining the euro, we are not responsible for euro debt, so therefore we are not part of that bailout package. And I mean, I think we also have to remember that the bailout actually comes with interest, so that the countries that are being lent money are expected to pay it back. So Germany at some point, if they remain afloat, at some point Germany could do quite nicely, and Finland and the others that have put money in. So there's certainly a concern about what a British exit would do for the European Union. I mean, I've had people saying from the far right of the party, of the parliament, that Marine Le Pen is really looking forward to the British exit because she wants the same thing for France. So, it's another reason to vote Remain in my book. But, there are those concerns. And therefore, there's also the feeling that in terms of the whatever negotiation that we manage to reach with the European Union, don't expect them to be particularly generous with us, because they won't want to give us terms that look pretty soft, because this basically says to other people, well, it doesn't matter too much if you go, we'll find an accommodation for you. So there is this thinking about, even if they want to be nice to us and treat us like Norway, don't expect that will be a very tough discussion.
But looking, sorry to take it back to this, and this is often the theme of the debate, to take it back to immigration. So we've given the in some ways the important points of concern for those who would be affected by a leave vote. But then there are also, we've heard the gentleman earlier, the member of the public, and I think just to give his quotes, He says essentially, he felt that it was a waste of money primarily. That was his point. But migration and immigration is a major theme. And Farooq, perhaps if you can tell us from any of the articles you've seen any immigration points, but I know I've got one here as well, which is from the 13th of June 2016. There's been a report by Migration Watch, and they said that if Britain votes to remain in the EU, net migration will exceed 250,000 a year for at least 20 years. An annual net migration by 2035 would be 265,000, with 60% of migrants coming from the EU. So they're citing big figures. Farooq, what have you seen? Have you seen?
Yes, and something similar. I think something more probably easy to see for the eye. Looking at this, there's two histograms side by side, or maybe one behind the other, on independent newspapers. Quite interesting. I think it's not what I expected to see, to be honest. There's two different histograms, one in pink, one in blue. The pink shows the non-EU immigrants to the UK since 1975. So non-EU immigrants have been far more in number, and they've been going up, and the way it's going up is pretty similar trajectory for even the EU refugees as well, or EU immigrants, a better word, coming into the UK. So clearly it's not really that doom and gloom as it sounds from the other side of the argument. Can I say one more thing before we perhaps move on, or maybe going towards the close of the show very soon? The Ahmadi Muslim community is purely non-political entity and completely spiritual. Yes, please.
Just on this immigration point, because this is our next point, which is about peace and security particularly. But just in terms of immigration, to really, because we did invite people from the Leave campaign to attend today, but they didn't respond. That I'm sure that they have reasons for it. But what they would say is that, Albania is soon to join the EU, Turkey is soon to join the EU, or likely to join the EU. Other Eastern European nations are soon to join the EU. And it was like the gentleman that was on the putting the question to David Cameron the other day. He was saying that there's an open door policy, and the more that come in, then the more that they're going to take jobs of British people. This is as the argument goes. The more the jobs they take, the less of the jobs we have. Cheaper labour. They're willing to do work at a lower price. And also many of them will also benefit from the benefit system. So this is the argument, and this has been a prominent theme. So particularly looking at Turkey and Albania, for example, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, Turkey is not going to be joining tomorrow. I mean, there is an accession procedure. There are a lot of things to go through on that, and not least issues around human rights. So. Any Turkey that would eventually join, if they want to, if no state vetoes them, is going to be a very different Turkey from the Turkey that we have today. On the other hand, it's true to say that it is a possibility, and it's also true to say that people, it may be the 2 or 3% of the population from there that want to move, as it has been from a number of other countries. It's more likely they'll go to Germany. They often have closer links, but nevertheless, the possibility is there. So I do think there are questions here about how we actually manage this process. And I think that in the UK, the issue has been how poorly managed it has been. That we have, all the figures show a net national benefit from people coming here from the European Union to work in financial terms, but some of the pressure may well be felt locally. So therefore, what are we investing in public services? What are we investing in a lot of the work to actually create a sense of community and community understanding at the local level, which I think is essential, is something that we really need to be doing, but also to really recognise the value of what it is that people bring. That if you look at the number of people from EU nationals and indeed third country nationals, outside the European Union working in the health service, working in social care, a lot of our public services rely on people being willing to leave home and come to the UK to work. So I think that all of that is extremely important to recognise that. And of course, we don't have a fixed number of jobs, and we also should be investing in training here. Yeah. Migration is not a substitute for doing your job as a government and still investing in training here.
At the issue here, in terms of Poland, let's take Poland for example. Is it, and I don't want to sound partisan, but the majority of the Poles that have come to the UK, I don't know if you know the figures or the situation, but how many of them have come and have relied on benefits and have essentially taken from the UK economy, and how much of that migration from Poland, for example, is actually contributing financially, economically? Because this is something that the first gentleman mentioned, wasn't it? He said, and just to quote him, we used to be the poor man of Europe, ... We've benefited from migration in terms of labour, and that's paraphrasing. So, how much of this is actually benefiting the UK financially in terms of labour coming to the UK?
I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but certainly the figures from London School of Economics and the other studies that have been done show it as a net benefit. It's not huge, but it is a net benefit. That if you look at the percentage of child benefit that's exported from the UK, mainly to Poland, but Ireland, Latvia, it's 0.3% of child benefit spending, infinitesimal. The amount of benefits that people receive here who are EU nationals, a lot of that is in-work benefits. So these are people who are working and who are working in low-paid jobs, so they have benefits which actually make up their income. So, one of the things that maybe we'll see with the increase in the living wage, I don't think it is a living wage, but an increase in the national wage, is supposed to do is to reduce the amount spent on tax credits. So there is an issue here about low-paid work. But a number of the sectors that we're talking about, whether that's food production, whether that's agricultural work in the fields, whether that's care sector, whatever, is low-paid work. And it's low-paid work whoever does it, and it has been for a long time. So the issue is more about what do we do to ensure that people have a decent living wage across the board. It is not something that you can blame on migrants. And somebody I know very well from the Migrants' Right Network says no migrant has ever demanded that you pay them less than somebody from the already existing community.
Yeah, I think I interrupted you before. I think if I was right, it was looking at the issue of peace and security and
yes,
and
I was going to say, because we are doing this show live on TV, but we are, as a Ahmadi Muslim community, are completely non-political. We are totally spiritual in our objectives, for stability of the entire mankind. And I think it would be very apt to bring in what the head of the Ahmadi community, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is the world, we call him the Caliph, not the Caliph that we hear in the news these days. We believe the Caliph who truly brings the state of fear into peace for entire mankind. Before I do that, one quick tweet from Mahmoud Malik says, "Stay decision will help UK work closely with EU to work for peace in the world." Now, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad was Mir Labi's helper, was in European Parliament about 3.5 years back. You were perhaps there, were you? Yes, and was December 2012 when he was there. And he's a short excerpt from his speech which does sum up his beliefs about what, it's not a recent thing, but again, it gives us an idea as to where we should stand to keep the world a safe place to live. Hazur says the formation of the European Union has been a great achievement on the part of the European countries, for it has been a means of uniting this continent. And so you should make all possible efforts to preserve this unity. Remember that strength of Europe lies in the remaining united and together as one. Such unity will not only benefit you here in Europe, but at a global level with the means for this continent to maintain its strength and influence. And speaking from an Islamic perspective, we should strive for the entire world to unite together.
And just to ask one closing question, if I can. It was mentioned earlier by one of the guests, or it was one of the speakers on the Vox Pops, which is that we used to be the poor man of Europe. And you mentioned earlier that it was formed after two horrific world wars that tore Europe apart. What role, looking ahead, would a vote to either leave or remain in the EU have on, and we don't have a great deal of time, so it'll have to be quite short, half a minute if we could, have on peace and stability within Europe and the wider world, do you think, as a closing topic?
I think that a vote to remain keeps us together, it binds us more closely, and that if we work for the values that the European Union has in its treaty, the values about human rights, about peace, about development across the world, then I think that that's something that we should really honour and strive for. Coming out I think means that we have broken that partnership, and that in isolation it's much more difficult to achieve those sort of global goals.
Thank you very much, Jean. Thank you very much, Jean Lambert, MEP, for joining us today. If the Vote Leave campaign think we've been in any way unimpartial or biased, which I hope we haven't, then we would very much welcome another show on this topic going on, because it's not an issue that's going to go away. It's an issue that's going to remain for everybody for a long time.
Emails were sent out to people anyway.
Oh yeah, they were, of course. They were contacted, but we'd very much welcome comments, and also social media comments online to the Twitter account and these issues. But thank you very much, Jean Lambert, MEP, for joining us today. It's been very good to have you with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the viewers, and until next time, please do engage with the debate and send your ideas to us, and we'll see you in 1 month's time for Presspoint. Thank you very much.
Unity has launched the campaign to try and counter the extremists.
Now speaking out to denounce terror and extremism.
30,000 people formed a human chain in the south this afternoon in the name of peace.
We're asking if religious intolerance is on the rise.
We believe that religious freedom is a fundamental human right.
Giving a message that Islam is a religion of peace.
We must all endeavor to spread love and a sense of community.